B. Collins.
Peter B. Collins, news and comment. It's Wednesday, May 30th, 2018. I'm struggling to edit down to fit all the news that I think is important today into about a half an hour. We'll see how it goes. And by the way, last night, just as I was ready to fall asleep, I realized that I failed to edit out a little sequence from yesterday's podcast where I made a mistake and paused and started over. And I do apologize if you found that off-putting. Today, we lead with a series of stories about the surveillance state and the collaboration of Silicon Valley tech giants with the Pentagon. There is a little bit of a revolt underway at the Googleplex in Mountain View. More than 4,000 workers, employees of Google, have signed on to a petition saying, "Don't be evil, Larry, Sergey. Don't sign that contract with the Pentagon to supply weaponized artificial intelligence to a program that's called Maven." Now, before I dive into this, I want to credit Yasha Levine, most recently the author of Surveillance Valley. He's been on this program many times over the last few years, explaining the origins of Google, and in particular, the program called Google Earth. That's the satellite imagery that we can use to take a bird's eye view of our own house. That originated from a no-bid contract with the National Geospatial Intelligence Agency, one of the 17 agencies that did not sign off, as Hillary Clinton claimed, on the Russiagate allegations. And the National Geospatial Intelligence Agency got together with Google to develop that. And that's just one of many contacts that Google has with the intelligence community. So today's New York Times article, written by Scott Shane, Katie Metz, I'm not sure, and Daisuke Wakabayashi, is fascinating. They got a hold of some internal company emails, and one of the leaders of the artificial intelligence activities over at Google is a woman named Fei-Fei Li. And Fei-Fei wrote an email to colleagues that was obtained by the New York Times. And when it came to announcing this new contract for the Maven program with the Defense Department, she said, "Avoid at, all caps, all costs, any mention or implication of AI. Weaponized AI is probably one of the most sensitized topics of AI, if not the most. This is red meat to the media to find all ways to damage Google." Now, the Maven program uses artificial intelligence to interpret video images and could be used to improve the targeting of drone strikes. That clearly is a military application of AI. And this report continues. It has fractured Google's workforce, fueled heated staff meetings and internal exchanges, and prompted about a dozen employees to resign. And a company that was acquired by Google in 2014, the London-based AI pioneer called DeepMind, the executives from that group say they are completely opposed to military and surveillance work, and the acquisition agreement that Google wrote said DeepMind technology would never be used for military or surveillance purposes. So we're hearing soothing comments from Sergey Brin and Larry Page. And Dr. Lee is still on the job there at Google. She advised her colleagues to be super careful in framing the project, noting that she had been publicly speaking on the theme of humanistic AI. Quote, "I don't know what would happen if the media starts picking up the theme that Google is secretly building AI weapons or AI technologies to enable weapons for the Defense Department." So, after the internal discussion, they decided just not to announce the Pentagon contract for Maven. But companies, people who worked at the company were in the know. And as recently as last week, Sergey Brin, co-founder, responded to a question at a company-wide meeting about the work on Maven, saying he understood the controversy, he's discussed it extensively with Page and CEO Pichai. But he said he thought it was better for peace if the world's militaries were intertwined with international organizations like Google rather than working solely with nationalistic defense contractors. Huh? That is the old saw that we used to call constructive engagement. But if you're facilitating the development of these deadly robotic weapons, that does not advance the cause of peace. And I call bullshit. Here's another story that broke today in the Washington Post. And we credit Senator Ron Wyden, Democrat of Oregon, who released a letter that he got on May 22nd from the Department of Homeland Security. Surveillance systems that track the locations of cell phone users can spy on their calls, texts, and data streams. And they are being turned against Americans as they roam the country and the world. Now, before I discuss these vulnerabilities, and there's a little bit of tech talk coming your way here, I want to note that Bill Binney, the former NSA top technical director worldwide, explained to me on several occasions, and other NSA whistleblowers have affirmed, that our government has been very comfortable with the relatively low levels of security on our networks because it enables them to hack in at will. Now, the FBI has demanded backdoors in iPhones. The NSA exploits the zero-day vulnerabilities of newly released software. And the system that is vulnerable here is called SS7. It was developed in the 1970s and modified to enable you to move from one cell tower to the next without your call being dropped. And SS7 transfers data along with the handoff of your call from Tower A to Tower B. And it appears that SS7 is highly vulnerable to bad guys. The article says, as the number of companies with access to SS7 grew from a handful to many thousands, the lack of built-in security became a growing problem. Oh, yeah? One Israeli surveillance vendor called Ability, in an online marketing video posted last year, bragged that its ULIN interception system can eavesdrop on cell phone calls on targets in New York or Los Angeles while agents are sitting at your desk anywhere in the world. Senator Wyden said the risks posed by SS7 go beyond privacy to affect national security. American, Chinese, Israeli, and Russian intelligence agencies are the most active users of SS7 surveillance. And I'll just underscore what we widely know. 80% of the NSA's budget is now being spent on offensive cyber warfare. And I think we can infer that the SS7 vulnerability is one that they continue to exploit. A tip of my hat to listener Dick Atley in Maine. He dropped me an email this morning with a link to an article that I've linked to in the show file for today's podcast, exposing a new facial recognition package created by Amazon. And it's called Recognition, or Recognition, and instead of a C, it's got a K in there. Maybe Recognition. It is described as powered for real-time surveillance. It can recognize you in photos of large groups of people and in crowded events or public places. Recognition can be used to identify people of interest, raising the possibility that those labeled suspicious by governments, maybe you're a Black Lives Matter activist or just a peaceful protester who objects to Trump, you could be seen as fair game for recognition surveillance. Amazon is testing it out in Orlando, Florida, and Washington County, Oregon, and government agencies in other states have expressed interest. And here's a real-world application of that facial recognition capability. Outside Buffalo, the school district in Lockport, New York, is implementing a program purchased from a Canadian company called SN Technologies. And the software is known as Aegis, A-E-G-I-S. It can be used to alert officials because it can identify both faces and objects so that whenever sex offenders, suspended students, fired employees, suspected gang members, or anyone else that's on a school's blacklist enters the property, Aegis also sends alerts anytime one of the top 10 most popular guns used in school shootings appears in view of a camera. Now, this school district outside Buffalo is spending $4 million from a New York State Smart School grant to buy this security system. But consider that all of the major school shootings in the last 5 years in the United States have been carried out by current students or alumni of the school in question. Would they be on the blacklist? Maybe, maybe not. And, says Rachel Levinson Waldman, a security and policing expert at the Brennan Center for Justice, the object recognition system seems pointless too. Most shooters don't brandish their guns before opening fire, and by the time they do, an object detection algorithm that could specify the exact type of weapon, well, just how useful would that be? So this is the creeping surveillance state that we live in today. And at Who, What, Why, Arthur O'Connor, who is Dr. O'Connor, head of the Data Science and Information Systems degree program at City University of New York, he's written a piece about employee monitoring. And it is euphemized at the corporate level as talent analytics or workforce analytics. And these tools allow the company to monitor virtually every move you make. And it's been a couple of years, but I talked to both FedEx and UPS drivers who've explained to me that the little digital devices they carry, that they scan the item before they deliver it to you with, it also tracks their movements. It knows when they take a pit stop in the bathroom or if they stop too long to chat with a secretary. It also knows if they started the engine of the truck before they fastened their seatbelt. Because the experts on extracting the most labor out of you have figured out that, well, if you turn on the engine and then fasten your seatbelt, you have wasted some fuel. And so squeezing out maximum efficiency from every employee is now a goal, and it's aided and abetted by the collection of data. Lots of it. New York Times today breaking a big story, and I will hasten to add that it is based on unnamed sources and presumed leaks. What it tells us is that last March 2017, Donald Trump, pissed as hell at Jeff Sessions, his attorney general, takes a meeting with him at Mar-a-Lago on a Saturday evening. Sessions had flown to Florida because Trump was refusing to take his calls about fixing the travel ban. And the New York Times writes omnisciently, when they met, Trump was ready to talk, but not about the travel ban. His grievance was with Sessions. The president objected to his decision to recuse himself from the Russia investigation. Trump had told aides that he needed a loyalist overseeing the inquiry, and he berated Sessions, told him he should reverse his decision and unrecuse himself. And that is an unheard of prospect. And Jeff Sessions apparently has some semblance of decency, or he knew he couldn't get away with it, and he declined. And to this day, based on a tweet this morning, Trump is still angry at Sessions. He says he regrets that he ever appointed him. And of course, he could replace him, but apparently that move is checkmated by Republicans in the Senate who don't want to confirm a replacement attorney general. So this creates a new bit of evidence of obstruction of justice. And it appears that this information was gathered by reporters who talked to people who were interviewed by the Mueller team or White House attorneys who may have leaked it. In any event, we have no evidence publicly to support this. But if it's true, well, it shows not only that the relationship between the two buddies who hate immigrants and, share a lot of racist sentiments, well, their relationship has deteriorated, and Trump is still extremely bitter that he doesn't have a loyalist as Attorney General who could block some of these moves. So, this results in commentary from Trey Gowdy, appearing on CBS this morning, the guy who led the endless Benghazi investigation and is now on his way out the door. He's retired from Congress at the end of this session. Trey Gowdy was asked whether Trump's request for Sessions to unrecuse himself was obstruction of justice. And listen what Gowdy says here. I don't think so. I think what the president is doing is expressing frustration that Attorney General Sessions should have shared these reasons for recusal before he took the job. Now, he only recused himself because he was forced to admit that he hadn't been forthcoming about meetings with Russians. And it was Al Franken who grilled him and shamed him into that corner where Jeff Sessions knew he had to recuse himself, and staff people at the Justice Department urged him to do so. Gowdy went on to say, I think what the president is doing is expressing frustration that Attorney General Sessions should have shared those reasons before he took the job, not afterward. If I were the president, I picked someone to be the country's chief law enforcement officer, and they told me later, oh, by the way, I'm not going to be able to participate in the most important case in the office, I would be frustrated too. They act as if this just happened to Jeff Sessions. He did it to himself. And this is not something that could have been predicted in advance. So this is an effort at revisionism by both Trump and Gowdy. So, of course, Trump picked up on that and tweeted the comments of Trey Gowdy and added to the notion that he could have picked somebody else. Trump said, I wish I did. But yesterday, Trey Gowdy also gave an interview to Fox News and was asked about the furious attacks from Trump about the alleged insertion of spies in the campaign. And Gowdy said, Trump himself in the Comey memos said if anyone connected with his campaign was working with Russia, I want you to investigate it. And it sounds to me like that is exactly what the FBI did. I think when the president finds out what happened, he's going to be not just fine, he's going to be glad that we have an FBI that took seriously what they heard. Gowdy continued, I am even more convinced that the FBI did exactly what my fellow citizens would want them to do when they got information they got, and that it has nothing to do with Trump. Now, as I mentioned yesterday, I do think that Trump has some issues that deserve further investigation. The corporate media is slowly acknowledging Stephen Halper is the mystery informant who met with some of Trump's people like Carter Page and George Papadopoulos in the summer and September of 2016. And now I haven't been able to run it down to my satisfaction, but I will report to you that there are people who are trying to link Stephen Halper to this mysterious British professor, Joseph Mifsud, who also had meetings with Trump people, and who is alleged to be the source of the information that Russia had Hillary Clinton emails. So you can imagine that Trump didn't bother to tweet out his his agreement with Trey Gowdy on this issue. And I remain curious about the Halper role in this, and we await further information. Trump addressed a mob in Nashville last night. He fed them mob-quality red meat, got them all stirred up. They were booing Senator Bob Corker, who was there to endorse his Republican hopeful successor, they hope, Marsha Blackburn, the far-right congresswoman from Tennessee. And Trump blurted out a lot of bullying, a lot of lies. In the end, Mexico's going to pay for the wall, I'm telling you. I don't want to cause any problem, but in the end, Mexico's going to pay for the wall. They're going to pay for the wall, and they're going to enjoy it. Well, President Peña Nieto tweeted shortly thereafter, President Donald Trump, no. Mexico will never pay for a wall. Not now, not ever. Sincerely, Mexico. This is a rival for the tweet of the day, which we'll get to in just a moment. But it's interesting because Trump was able to bully the presumed Democratic opponent of Marsha Blackburn. He is the former governor of Tennessee, Phil Bredesen. Bredesen was cowed by the attacks on Democrats by Trump and very carefully picked his words. He doesn't want to piss anybody off. And it's that kind of tiptoeing that really defines the Democratic Party today. Trump also went after MS-13, the gang that was born in Los Angeles, which he imagines he can deport to its extinction. He bragged about deporting thousands of MS-13. The numbers are much lower than that. Then he said that Nancy Pelosi is an MS lover because when Trump referred to MS-13 as animals, she objected. And so this is what passes for discourse in the Trump era. Oh, and the other tweet of the day is from the makers of Ambien, the pharmaceutical company called Sanofi, because Roseanne Barr blamed her racist tweet against Valerie Jarrett that caused ABC to cancel her TV show and take down all of her reruns. Everything that she ever did is now disappeared like a Bill Cosby. And she said, well, you know, it was Ambien. It was in the middle of the night. It was a holiday and blah, blah, blah. So the makers of Ambien tweeted, people of all races, religions, and nationalities work at Sanofi every day to improve the lives of people around the world. While all pharmaceutical treatments have side effects, racism is not a known side effect of any Sanofi medication. Oh, and Trump, while he has stepped around any direct comments on Roseanne Barr's racism, which was at least in part enabled by his own, he refers to the chair of ABC, Bob Iger, called Valerie Jarrett to let her know that ABC doesn't tolerate comments like those made by Roseanne Barr. Gee, he never called President Donald J. Trump to apologize for the horrible statements made and said about me on ABC. Maybe I just didn't get the call. Well, of course, he wants to distract you from the deep racism expressed by Roseanne Barr, and whatever critical comments have come from ABC or Disney employees pale in comparison to many of the things that Trump has proudly said. Every day I pause for a second to thank the people who support my work here at the Peter B. Collins Podcast with your subscriptions. Kevin Beckley, Pauline Nixon, Marvin Rasmussen, they all kick in $5 or $10 a month. And Ford Green just renewed his annual subscription. Thank you, Barrister. I appreciate that. I'd like you to join their ranks. I need more subscribers because people come and go. Visit peterbcollins.com. Click on the menu tab, pull it down, click on Become a Subscriber, and you'll be landing on the sign-up page where you can make an easy choice, $5, $10, $20 a month, a $50 annual subscription. And yes, we are working assiduously to update the PBC app for iPhone and iPad, and I just got word that it's still in the laboratory. Hamas has unilaterally declared a ceasefire with Israel, and Israeli officials are saying they will stop bombing Gaza unless there is more fire from the Gaza Strip. And this was a 24-hour period where we believe it was Islamic Jihad launched some number of shells and short-range rockets into southern Israel. The Israeli Air Force bombed at least 65 military sites. There were no fatalities on either side, and it's reported that this was kind of a staged event where the Islamic militants made sure they didn't actually harm any Israelis, and the Israeli Air Force bombed mostly empty, unmanned facilities in Gaza. Couple of notes about airplanes. MH370 was the flight that disappeared over Asia several years ago, and it appears we're giving up the ghost. They are winding down the search after spending $70 million to try to find the missing wreckage. Meanwhile, the other Malaysian flight, the one that was shot down over Ukraine, is being blamed on Russia after a consortium of international investigators announced that Russia was the source of that missile. Now, I remain skeptical about this event. The Buk missile launcher was a portable unit. There are these reports that one was trucked in from Russia, fired the rockets, and was trucked right back over to Russia. But we also know that the Ukraine military was armed with Russian munitions, and that the Ukrainians had the Buk surface-to-air missiles as well. And this is where I really miss Robert Perry, because he was the late investigative reporter who really dug into this story. But if we do accept on its face the international investigators' report, well, today, Foreign Minister Stef Blok of the Netherlands, whose country had the bulk of the fatalities of nearly 300 people on that downed airliner, he told journalists ahead of a UN Security Council session that he had come to New York to confront the Russian delegation eye to eye in the hope of compelling Russia to cooperate in the investigation. And Russia maintains its posture, as it has for 4 years, that they didn't do it. And the report that came out last week announced that the missile used to shoot down the aircraft, a Boeing 777, belonged to the 53rd Anti-Aircraft Brigade, an active-duty Russian unit based in the city of Kursk. So that was their conclusion, and I, again, remain somewhat skeptical about this. Yesterday, in Ukraine, they announced that Arkady Babchenko, a Russian journalist, had been killed by agents of Moscow. But today, Arkady Babchenko appeared at a news conference in Kiev, and he sheepishly said, "I'm sorry, but I faked my own execution." He said that he had been warned of a plot. The Ukrainian service, SBU, had learned of a serious plan to kill him 2 months ago, warned him about it 30 days ago. So he decided to essentially stage a sting operation and fake his own death. I still don't get the full picture there, but that's what we know. John Bolton named an old buddy of his as his chief of staff, as Fred Fleitz. He worked for Bolton under the George W. Bush administration. Then he parked himself as vice president for policy and programs at the Center for Security Policy. This is a group identified by the Southern Poverty Law Center as promoting Islamophobia, and it's the group that was founded by Frank Gaffney, a former Reagan official who has been Muslim bashing for years. And Fleitz is one of his protégés, or maybe just a minion. I can't be sure. In Charlottesville, Virginia, a woman who I believe I've interviewed once or twice is running for Congress. Her name is Leslie Coburn, and you may know about her journalist work and also her husband, Andrew. They have both been outspoken investigative reporters, and they don't shrink from criticizing very powerful institutions. So Coburn is running for Congress, and she has been accused of anti-Semitism because of a book she published 27 years ago that was critical of Israel and the United States and the U.S.-Israeli relationship. Now, let me note that on Memorial Day, Leslie Coburn got a real shot in the arm. That is when Representative Tom Garrett, the incumbent Republican, announced that he's all boozed up and he will not seek re-election, apparently favoring rehab. But the undercurrent of this campaign, which is actually amplified by the report in today's New York Times, is that Leslie Coburn is anti-Semitic because she has criticized Israel. The headline reads, "Democratic candidate who criticized Israel faces charges of anti-Semitism." And just 5 paragraphs into the story, a Jewish woman who was part of a group who met with Coburn in the last couple of days said flatly, "None of us think she's anti-Semitic. That's not even an issue. It's more about where you are with Israel." That hasn't stopped the chair of the Republican Party there issuing a press release, Democrats nominate virulent anti-Semite in the 5th District. It should be noted that the 5th District includes Charlottesville, which was the scene of the racially tinged protests and counter-protests last summer, which led to the death of one anti-racist protester. And what's curious here is that the Republican there, who believes that she is anti-Semitic, well, he was countered by the executive director of the state Republican Party in Virginia. The 5th District is not a racist district, and I don't see them ever voting for an anti-Semite like Leslie Coburn. Now, racism is central to the history of Charlottesville, and it flared again last summer. And to claim that it's not a racist place, that I guess refers to African Americans, but it's got a woman running for Congress who's anti-Semitic, when of course she has simply criticized the state of Israel, that is the state of play in American politics today. And finally, you can say bye-bye to Eric Greitens. He was the Navy SEAL who rose to become governor of Missouri. And in a moment yesterday in the Show Me state, he said, show me the door. He resigned after 4 months of fighting these allegations that he forced his hairdresser to have sex with him, took a compromising photo of her, and threatened to blackmail her if she didn't keep quiet. He's also been accused by prosecutors of misusing a donor list for political purposes. Eric Greitens, of course, is a victim in his own mind, but he has resigned as the governor of Missouri. Thanks for listening to my daily news and comment podcast. Got close to half an hour today. We post this on YouTube, and I'm Peter B. Collins.
Happy trails to you until we meet again. Happy trails.